what problems do you see right now that you would like startups to come up with ideas for?
We look at three things. So we see obviously in urban areas in terms of population growth, urban densification, and urbanization in general.
How you test that these companies are actually, by the way, I've been using this word a lot recently, but legit. I feel like I'm back in like hanging around with the park with my friends, but yeah, legit.
No, I think honestly, what helps a lot, I mean, and that's also how business works in Europe, right? I mean, a lot through.
Does it mean that the background has to be within construction or not necessarily?
Definitely not. No, definitely not. I mean, of course, it is helpful to have probably or a specialist in your team that has expertise, but I don't think it's needed. It's helpful, but I don't think it's needed to start a venture or to.
How is technology actually used in AEC? In corporate innovations, we explore the innovation and implementation procedures used by those who actually use the tech on a day-to-day basis. Before we get started though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode. So, yeah, head of innovation at Implenia based in Switzerland. So why construction maybe, and why innovation?
Good questions, and thanks for having me, first of all. Why construction? Let's start with that. The honest answer is my previous, let's say, career step was actually in consulting and in project management. All sorts of industries, both commercial and public sector. But I was always the one there as an external, interim management, consulting, freelance, and I was a bit fed up with that because you can always start something, but you can never really see the end of it. And that was my main decision, was to move into a hands-on industry. By the way, I'm not an engineer. I'm also not an architect by education. I'm a business economist, which means that I'm a
Welcome
bit
to
odd.
construction.
Thank you very much. I'm a bit odd one out, but that's also the step to innovation. I think that's also the cool thing that I always liked from back in the days in my studies, is really the interaction between how a business actually can exist and also operates in the larger market and industry, and also how the industry has an impact on the business. And I think innovation is one of the mechanisms through which that happens. So reacting to changes in the market and also the company that can change the market. And it's a bit philosophical maybe, but that's how I started to shift into more innovation consultancy, became freelance, also looked for cool opportunities internationally. And that's how I met Implenia, and that's also what made me pack my suitcase to Switzerland.
Because you're originally from Holland, right?
Yeah, Netherlands.
Okay.
Netherlands.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
The Netherlands, exactly. I correct everyone also in the company here. No worries.
I'm just an arrogant British guy. It's like, yeah.
No worries.
Karel, so tell us a bit about Implenia, like how big you guys are. What do you guys do? Like maybe what type of construction you do, how many employees, etc.
Yeah. So Implenia is a large construction player. So we're a bit. I don't want to say a conglomerate. That sounds a bit clumpy or too large. But we're about 9,000 people, and we do 4 main activities. So we have civil engineering, buildings, which is buildings contracting. We have a unit focused on real estate development and real estate management and investment. And then we have a unit called specialties, which is basically a portfolio of, let's say, smaller, more specialized business units that are playing along typically the engineering and planning value chain part. Those are the 4 commercial units we have. And within that, we do a lot of different disciplines let's say, along the construction value chain, anywhere where we can add value to our customers. Newly, since last year, also in the property management space. So we acquired Wincasa, which is the market leader in Switzerland for property management. So we are slowly sort of extending our early involvement in the value chain, and also our, let's say, operational, let's say, the operational phases in the value chain.
Not only you construct new stuff, but also take over existing and perhaps improve it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we do that either in real estate. So we look for interesting development or investment potential that we can turn around, either for a client, or we do it ourselves as a developer, as a traded developer. And on the other hand, we also look into serving our customers or investors in this operational phase, either in civil engineering, so which is more related to inspection and maintenance of bridges. That's a growing space, of course, in Western Europe, that we're newly getting into, but also in property, so real estate management, asset management, etc. Because of course, I mean, you want to get, I think my overall learning also from other industries is that you want to get rid of this one-off project-driven volume. You want to go to more recurring revenue, recurring touch points with your customers, and that's what we try to build up, more the integrated way of doing things.
Ideally subscriptions, right?
Sorry?
Ideally subscriptions. But
yeah, subscriptions, or at least long-term contracts that you can work with. I mean, that makes just more sense. It also stimulates innovation. It stimulates improvement. And you don't have this one-off mindset, let's get the project done and over to the next.
And I have to say
as a service.
that your share price has gone up 1.77% today, I guess, on the news that you're talking to us today.
Well, that was not broadly communicated, so I would be very surprised if that's the reason. But that's of course good news. I think.
Yeah. All right. So when the release, just before the releases, we'll stick all our money in Implenia share price. Huh?
Give it a try, but of course, welcome to invest. I mean, this is of course not a recommendation, but of course, you're always welcome to invest.
Karel, what size of projects do you guys work on? And well, as you say, as traded, can you share the revenue number with us?
Yeah, of course. So I think we did last year roughly about 3.6 or 3.8 billion Swiss francs, so 3.2 billion Great British pounds or sterling, pound sterling. From that, we reached, I think last year we did about 120 million revenue. So that's like, I think 4% EBIT margin.
You mean profit? 120 profit?
Yeah, exactly. Profit.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. So mix it up. So I think we're not performing bad compared to others, but of course, as usual in construction, you want to improve your margins. I think, I mean, what's mostly interesting to mention is, of course, that also to the point we said before, is, I mean, you want to bring in more recurring revenues. You want to create more long-term business models that bring in profitable growth, where both we, but also, of course, our customers profit from. And I think, I think we're really sort of creating at the moment also a portfolio of business and types of business models and projects that can actually answer to that. So I think we made quite some changes there over the last years, I think well on the way to do what we have to do.
How much of this 120 million goes into innovation, if you guys think about it this way?
I think I dare to calculate that once, but then I immediately delete it because it was too painful. No, it's no. I mean, no offense to my colleagues, of course. No, it's not much. I mean, we do invest a lot in improving and also digitizing our business on the project level, right? So I think there we have quite a stable part of, let's say, I think in English terms, you say the soft cost in construction is also invested in those things. We do more with building information modeling, using reality capturing on site, using, let's say, BIM-based applications to digitize construction. We have the first, let's say, paperless construction sites now in the company. So we do, I mean, that is not included in the number I calculated, but if I look at purely how we innovate in innovation as a central activity, including partnerships, stimulating startup investments, doing entrepreneurship, which we do a lot, tech scouting, then it's a very low number if you set that off to the EBIT. But let's say less than 1%.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, so, Karel, what does the head of innovation? What does your role entail typically?
Yeah. So, I mean, I always tend to say I'm not responsible for innovation, because the responsibility is obviously with many people and also with, in the end, everyone. But what I try to do, I'm responsible for, let's say, stimulating, facilitating, and also accelerating innovation. That can be in the field of entrepreneurship. So that means developing internal ideas or internal business models together with our teams. It can mean tech scouting or startup collaboration. And it can also mean that we set up partnerships or even investments in startups or tech companies or partners. And along these three axes, in close collaboration with our divisions, with our commercial units, we do these activities. And in that sense, I'm sometimes more of an orchestrator and an enabler than really driving a very strict portfolio of many initiatives across all the businesses. I always have a small team, but with an important mission. So what we really try to do is find the pain points, find the priorities, and then help and collaborate with our divisions to get things going in these fields. So that's a bit how we work.
Yeah. What is the I did say earlier that we'd ask this at the end, but I think it actually fits well. Like, what does a day to day and maybe week to week look like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it can be quite various. I mean, last week I was on a site to see a new promising tech startup from Switzerland, doing a demo on site with machines. Very cool. Cannot say too much, but that's like also part of my work, to really go and see startups. Sometimes being in the lab at the universities, or meeting founders. Obviously, getting a feeling of what is happening and where can we test and play. On the other hand, a lot of internal alignment, of course. I mean, because of this orchestration role, I'm obviously always involved in important decisions related to innovation or priority setting, or typical word in corporate setting is alignment with different players, with our management. So there's also a lot of time invested in that. And of course, what is key is that we also host, let's say, workshops, or let's say really formats to stimulate innovation in the company or to enable innovation. So quite often I'm also shifting from this orchestrating role into being a facilitator and leading a discussion or a workshop, or training part of our employees on certain innovation methodologies. I'm actually now preparing a cool training for the top 100 management in the company in a few weeks. So it can be quite various. I think it's also healthy, and I also like that balance between being a bit more operationally involved, keeping a feeling of what's really happening in the startup world, in the company, with our entrepreneurs, and on the other hand, also being involved in the strategic decisions, because obviously, you need to make sure that things are also going in the right direction and are linked to each other. So so that means a lot of meetings, drinking coffee, meeting people outside, talking also to the venture capital industry, to universities, researchers, and also trying to get a hold of what's happening. So of course, also I listen to the Bricks and Bytes podcast. It's my true source of inspiration.
Brilliant. What's the most exciting when you think about like your duties and impact that you can have in the business?
Yeah, so I think for me personally, two things. One, and it sounds maybe a little bit cliche, but I don't mean it that way. I'm seriously, it's from a very serious point, is that obviously there's a lot we can and must improve in our industry, be it in civil engineering, buildings construction, real estate, doesn't matter. We have a huge footprint in terms of ecological footprint, in terms of climate change impact, and everything related to that. So all the problems and challenges that creates. And I actually did a further education, executive education last year on the field of climate innovation, and that helped me to really sharpen my attention to also that topic. So what drives me a lot is how can we make sure that we make processes or the business overall or the company overall or the industry overall just more sustainable and a positive change, or let's say a change in a positive, or facilitate change in a positive way. Sounds a bit soft maybe, but I think that's really one of the things that made me as an outsider also come in and say, hey, there's a lot to change and to improve here. So basically this daily reminder that there's so much to do and still so much potential. And the second thing is what I love about my job, and what also is, I think, very much linked to what I do on a daily basis, is also the exchange with startups or with tech companies and with let's say the entrepreneurs on the outside, and on the other hand the intrapreneurs on the inside. So on a daily basis, I meet people that are motivated and also successful, or at least struggling to build up something new, be it small or big, and bring in that let's say the typical entrepreneurial spirit to get things changed. And I think that's really what motivates me, and what makes my job fun, because that's where I get my inspiration from, so to say.
Yeah, just wanted to touch on before you go on. Do you get within Implenia? Do you implement more innovation from scouting from startups or from this internal entrepreneurship? Would you say?
Good question. I think honestly, it's probably, I mean, if you include what we do in terms of IT and SaaS solutions and IT solutions that are more related to digitizing the business, probably the majority of what we do is basically sourcing external solutions on the market, be it from startups, tech companies, or the usual software providers. But I think slowly it's becoming a bit at par, in the sense that we have more and more cases of entrepreneurship that turn into successful business models or propositions, either for internal improvement or a really external market with external market potential. And obviously, when you consider new business models, and I think in the end, innovation is also really about new value propositions and business models, then I think entrepreneurship is a very important element. There's a lot of critique about how effective is entrepreneurship in the long run. It doesn't make sense to wait and see what internal employees do. But I think one thing is very much key, and it doesn't matter if it's a single individual or a team. If there's an entrepreneurial mindset, or if there's a clear pain point or idea they want to work on, it's better to stimulate and help them, be it relevant for the business, of course, than to just push it to someone else that gets a clear assignment, like, now you need to do this, without any motivation. And I think what I tried to say there is that entrepreneurship is probably not the only solution. I think only entrepreneurship works maybe in strong R&D driven companies, maybe not in construction. I think we are just not an R&D machine. I think no construction company really is. But I think if you focus on entrepreneurship, and if you look at the ideas and also the energy that comes from programs like that, but also from what we do in that respect, I think we're closely getting at par with new propositions and business models. Not all of them readily validated and ready on the market, but it slowly starts to become more common to just push things out and try things and test it on the market and get evidence on what really makes sense. And that's also needed, because you can improve your internal business, which is key, but at the end of the day, you also need to change your business. And that typically happens with new business models, new value propositions.
Cool. Okay, so is there like a playbook that Implenia follow when it comes to innovation? Is there like a 5-step process?
We have, let's say, roughly speaking, a 3-step process, which we basically break down into different programs we do. So the most structured program we have is called is our entrepreneurship program, which is called Kickbox. It's a methodology developed, I think, originally by Adobe, or experimented and set up by Adobe, and then translated in a complete working tool for corporates by a Swiss telco company called Swisscom. Now the team that set that up is actually a separate startup, but long story short, they have developed a sort of a full-blown methodology, easy to use for entrepreneurship. That's fully structured. We have dedicated coaching. We have a 3-step process called red box, blue box, gold box, Basically, red box is the very early step of problem validation. The blue box is setting up a POC typically with a sponsor from the business that wants to promote that POC.
What's
And if
a
that's
POC?
validated,
Sorry?
proof of concept, or basically a proof of concept. So an evidence the technology can work or the solution could work. It doesn't tell you if it will work in the long run, but it will tell you if it makes sense to do it and to continue. And then after that stage gate, we basically look for internal investors that want to start to implement the solution, which is the gold box. That logic we use also a bit more in our open innovation activities, where we work with external startups or with tech companies to really have a dedicated approach to go from basically from early ideas or potential solutions to validated concepts that could actually work and stick on the market.
Yeah. On the external startups, how do you find the right solutions amongst, let's say, few solutions which solve the same problem? How do you validate which one is the one you should choose from? Is it a personal thing, or is it more, what's the criteria?
Yeah, good question. I mean, this is something I notice myself saying this at least every other week or so to my team, like, guys, we need to prioritize more. We have so many opportunities. There's so many companies we talk to. Which ones really make sense? And this is a bit the dynamic. So I think whether you call it mushrooming or sort of growing the ecosystem, we have built up a lot of network in the last years. Meaning we have personally met a lot of startups, especially during the COVID years. Anyway, you were in a home office doing Teams calls the whole day, so why not call with everyone to just figure out what are the startups doing, what is actually new, who is who. But also, going to conferences, talking to the VCs, the network here in Switzerland, ETH Zurich, EPFL, or TU Munich in Germany, very, very solid universities with a lot of technical spin-offs or construction tech related spin-offs. So we try to keep that network going. What is let's say the drawback of that approach is that you have a huge list of companies, but you still need to figure out which one makes sense to talk to and to go into a POC with. And I think about 2 years ago, we started to map a bit better with our divisions, like where do we need to look for your specific unit? And within that question is also the question, like, what are your pain points? What needs to be solved, or what could be improved? What is your intention? And then to go back to this huge list we made, or we have, to basically filter, okay, what do we actually know? What have we learned in the last years? Of course, you need to clean up a bit the list, because in 1 or 2, 3 years time, a lot of startups also get out of business. But it's then interesting to look back and see, hey, this company still exists and they're still very solid, so let's talk to them. So it's a little bit sometimes serendipitous, but what we also do, which changed also over the last 2 years, is more dedicated screening and scouting in niche areas where our business units need help or need digital or innovation potential. And then basically make a short list, go through them. Obviously, we put the ones on we know, because I don't believe it makes sense to look for a needle in a haystack in probably 10,000 new contact startups per year. You need to also decide, is that startup capable? Is it a feasible technology? Is it a trustworthy person and team? Will they actually deliver? Are they a bit flexible? And also, can they deal with the hardship of doing business with corporates?
I'm glad you recognize that. Just roughly, how many solutions would you say you get pitched, maybe a day or week?
I think probably not daily, but I would say a few a week. Let's say inbound, without any. I mean, if you include all the spam nowadays you get on any kind of. I mean, I have the impression nowadays all this SaaS sales is automated, so you get like the most worthless emails with requests and semi-personalized email invitations, which I always delete, by the way. So if there's people listening, it's better just write me on LinkedIn or write a proper email. That makes more sense. But no, if I filter that out, then I think a few a week. And I think basically from our own activities, which is basically newsletters, following podcasts, checking the web, talking to others, we might also put 1-2 companies a week on this list. So we keep growing that database, but of course, the longer you do it, the more filtering you do. So we don't have this VC style database where you say, let's build up 5,000 companies per year, and then we peel it down, and then we are left with 10. That doesn't work that way. So we're very picky what we put on that list. It needs to fit to our strategic direction. It needs to fit to the company. It needs to fit to the pain points we look into, because the built environment and the construction sector is so huge. There's so many niche solutions that you can easily get lost in looking for solutions that are totally irrelevant to our company, to our needs, which can also be disappointing sometimes for startups, because they might think, okay, wow, this is a big player, so probably I can scale internationally if I work with them, or I can do 100 projects a year with them. But it depends very strongly on the niche where you play. And if you're in the wrong niche, that can be disappointing.
Yeah, so you said so many interesting things here. So you said that there's no like definite way of like figuring out the tech really, because there's lots of factors that depend on the choice. But also from startup point of view, thinking about this, how difficult for them is to understand what you need, how you operate, and like can they be a fit for you as well? Can you tackle this question from this side?
You mean from the startup side?
Yes, because obviously they have to adjust to your case. But from their point of view, is there any playbook that startups should follow to hit the playbook of Implenia?
Hey listeners, I want to take a quick break to remind you about the Bricks Bytes newsletter. If you're interested in learning about the technology shaping the future of construction, you won't want to miss the valuable insights we share each week. To get this exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox, head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today. Link is in the show notes. Back to the show.
I mean, so many playbooks.
Sorry for these playbook questions.
We'll get back to that term later. I don't think there's a lot of play in it, but no, I think what is key is to understand. That's why I'm also so annoyed by all these random emails from these SaaS providers, is that you need to understand the company. I mean, read the website, check the kind of projects we do, because that will save you a lot of time as a founder or as a startup, because maybe you think we are in deep drilling activities, because we do tunneling and underground works, but we're not specialists in deep drilling. And you can see that when you just go to the website. Of course, we can offer these services through contractors for sure, but it's a bit a strange example maybe, but look for what the company is really trying to do and where they're moving towards to. That can already save you a lot of time. And I think also, don't promise too much. I think a challenge of many startup founders nowadays, and I have easy talking because I'm not on that side, but that's just how I see it, is that they come in with a lot of features, a lot of promises, sometimes without a working product, and that's not what we need. We have highly expert specialist people that are obviously always interested to introduce some scope creep and try to look for new features and extend the tool and make it, of course, fit for exactly their day job. But in the end, that's maybe not even what we need in essence. Sometimes it can be very simple. And I think don't overpromise, but bring something solid fast. And also be aware that, and that's maybe up to our enterprise, nature, be aware that sometimes it takes a while to get contracts in place, to get sort of the financials in place, to get the whole IT connection, data security, all these topics, all these questions will pop up at some point. And the sooner you start addressing that and being open to that, the faster you will probably have a working agreement with us. But in essence, in testing and rapid feedback, we're very open and we typically are very fast. But if you really want to work with us, you need to have a bit of patience. And I don't say that because we need to be, we can just be slow. I think we also need to speed up the processes in which we contract startups and tech companies, especially early stage, and test with them. A bit the sandbox idea. But on the other hand, also as a startup, you need to accept that you're not dealing with a small contractor that can just chip in from his cash box and say, well, whatever, do it, and we'll see whatever it takes. We are an enterprise, so things are slower and are sometimes a bit more cumbersome. But then again, there couldn't be long-term value in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there how much, and it may be like completely zero, but how much of the tech that you adopt externally is because you think of the problem and then you try and find a solution versus a solution perhaps landing on your desk and you thinking, actually this is quite cool.
We look for the problem. Yeah. So I think I would say gut feel, so half of the cases probably. And like I said, we're shifting that. So we're really trying to work more challenge and problem focused. So what are the pain points, what needs to be improved, and what are solutions to do that? But I think also it happens, I would say roughly half of the cases where we say, we didn't know this existed. It makes sense. We have read about it. Maybe we should take the gamble and ask some feedback from our teams. And we try to be a bit careful with that, because you cannot over ask specialists in the company or a BIM expert or a project manager or a construction manager, because they are busy, right? I mean, they're not there to just give feedback, but we have a few ambassadors in the company that are quite fast giving feedback and can sort of get feedback in from the sides or from the teams. And we do that selectively when we think this is a solution that could make sense. We understand the problems this solution tries to tackle, but we still need to validate if this problem is really a case for us or not. And there you come to the point I mentioned before, that sometimes it can mean that we don't really have that problem, or the problem is very small in our case, because we don't do 100 projects in all the different disciplines we do, right? I mean, a large-scale alpine tunnel transfer project, that's only a handful. There's not more of these projects. So it very much depends on the solution and the problem you're tackling.
Yeah.
What problems do you see right now that you would like startups to come up with ideas for?
One, mine, just before we go there, just one last question is maybe on a bit more related to the topic, would just be how you test that these companies are actually, by the way, I've been using this word a lot recently, but legit. I feel like I'm back in like hanging around with the park with my friends, but yeah, legit.
I think there's many things that you could test. I mean, for me, if there's a certain trust.
Well, if they follow Bricks and Bytes on LinkedIn, then that's probably a legit
first check. Yeah.
First check.
No. I think honestly, what helps a lot. I mean, and that's also how business works in Europe, right? I mean, a lot through personal contact and references. So if we know that someone came from a good research group or has. Recently, I met, by the way, a founder, still very early stage, and I know he showed me the evidence. He did like, I think, more than 100 interviews in the construction industry before even starting to code. I mean, and he showed me the Miro board, like the work board he made with all these interview summaries, and I was like, holy, that if some. Even I don't know the guy. He was actually recommended to someone to me, but even without that, seeing that, I know this guy knows what he's doing. He's really interested to explore and to understand how this world works and what are problems. And probably he knows more about the problem he's investigating than me or than my colleagues even. And that, I think that's for me a proof point that someone is willing to invest the work, has done his research, but also is it doesn't have to be a known person, but it can be someone with a decent background, either in the tech space or with it, and therefore he or she probably needs a lot of information on how construction works, or someone that is very solid from the construction or real estate space and is trying to implement a new technology that he might not know, but he's trying to investigate with a good tech founder. And I think that's the two tastes or types you could have. But for me, are they willing to investigate, or did they already investigate, and do they have a background that fits to what they try to do? Those are two things I would look into.
That's interesting. Does it mean that the background has to be within construction or not necessarily?
Definitely not. No, definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, it is helpful to have probably a co-founder or a specialist in your team that has construction or real estate expertise, but I don't think it's needed. It's helpful, but I don't think it's needed to start a venture or to to get into contact with construction companies. And a few weeks ago, I spoke to a researcher from EPFL in Lausanne, big technical university, specialist in robotics, very smart guy working on a very cool case. But it was clear that he had not much understanding of how construction works or how a typical site works. But yeah, that was his help question to me. Like, can you give feedback from a construction point of view? What could work and what would be reasonable use cases to apply my technology? So he's basically open and honest, saying, I know that there are some use cases, but I need input from the industry to basically figure out which use cases make most sense. And that's the honest answer. So don't come knocking the door saying you have figured it all out, although you did no research, or you have the solution. And by the way, it costs you so many thousand per month if you haven't done that research, because it takes me or colleagues maybe half an hour to burst that bubble, and it's just a waste of anyone's time.
It's arrogance.
I mean, a bit of. It's not bad to have a bit of. I think the French word is bravoure, a bit of braveness and be a little bit bold when you knock on the door. I think there we can learn a lot from our US colleagues, but also have your story and have your research done. That's just important. And if you haven't done so, just be honest. Just say, I'm just calling because I want to have feedback from you, and if I make it into construction, I will give you another call that we can really test this. But now I just want to hear some feedback from you. And these conversations I love, because then you have an open, honest conversation and you can just brainstorm on how this technology could work.
Brilliant. Should we touch on the problem that you guys would like to be solved?
Yeah.
And you don't see startups doing it, or maybe you see some?
This is the part where we're going to overrun the time of this podcast.
Should have asked it first.
No, so I mean, how do you want me to break that down? Like more like what are like typical challenges we see in the industry and in the overall markets that we react to, or more like internal focus, or what kind of?
Let's start from general. What problems you see that can be tackled, perhaps?
Yeah, I think if we go like macro, like general, and then you could then maybe talk about more specific internal, and then great if we can end on like a case study of like, okay, we had a problem with X and we implemented Y.
Cool. Okay, great. Well, I think for us, strategically, like macro level, we look at three things. So we see obviously a huge pull in urban areas in terms of population growth, urban densification, and urbanization in general. So what we try to do, and what our strategy also is to really focus on more urban areas and to play a role in shaping basically these cities and urban areas of the future. And that means you need to look into efficient construction logistics. You need to look into the challenge of basically also doing infill development and also doing brownfield development. What does that mean for infrastructure? What does it mean for, let's say, energy, water, etc.? So those are a bit the challenges that we look into. And I think in some areas where we play, that's still relatively, I wouldn't say easy, but it's still manageable. But my belief, but also that's the overall view, is that in the future it's going to be more and more complex. So if you know how to handle that kind of construction activities, you have an advantage in the future. So that's a little bit like the kind of challenge that we look into, I would say more on the urban level. And then obviously what we see is the whole transformation, the whole shift to renewable energy, which you could call, or I always call, the future of energy, which is already being shaped, which creates a lot of new opportunities, also a lot of challenges. And then lastly, of course, you have the whole question of, okay, how are we going to solve the challenge of climate change? How are we going to make sure that we decarbonize construction, etc.? And obviously, that's a space where you can have endless opportunities. And we actually have some cool startup cases or partnerships where we try to also play a role in that space. And related to that, translating that into market opportunities, you have things like modernization of buildings. So the energetic retrofit of buildings is key, which, by the way, in Switzerland already, and I think Germany, I'm not sure, but probably similar development. And I think that's going to happen throughout Europe, that the amount of building permits for modernization and retrofit projects is going to overtake the amount of new builds, which is actually more or less already happening, which is important because it means you need to rescale, but also refocus on modernization, which is typically more complex, more risky than new builds in general, because you have to deal with existing buildings, existing materials, complexities on the site. Such things are all playing a role at the moment, and things we look into. Yeah, I mean, those are a few typical things. And I think focus on internal challenges. I mean, like with any construction company, so I don't say anything special there, is to how to improve your margins, how to increase your profitability by still delivering customer value. So we still want to do the things that our customers need and what makes our customers happy, but it needs to happen at a fairer price or at a fairer profitability, because with the current margin, it's difficult for the industry to really transform itself. But with all the previously mentioned challenges, that's needed. So you can do two things. You can sort of cry and whine about it, like it's difficult, price is too low, tendering difficult. But I believe strongly you need to start influencing that with being innovative in how you shape your projects, how you offer your projects, trying to shape also a bit the let's say, how does the future of construction or real estate look like? So that's a bit the high level story. Yeah. And then maybe to add to that finally, I mean, one way to do that is also to improve, let's say, your what we call value assurance. So that's improving the risk management and the contract management, and basically having clear checks and balances on the long-term operations in projects. Which means managing risks, also opportunities. That's also key. That's also something our CEO and also our management team is focusing on a lot on in the moment. Is also to make sure that those things we already build or design, that there we also take out risks as much as possible, because a lot of value can still be gained from what we already do today. So you need to improve what we do today, but you also need to look into the opportunities that are shaped now for the future.
So you're thinking that these macro and internal challenges would be more solved by point solutions, or more kind of organized for workflow solutions, integrated solutions?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think probably both. I mean, it depends a bit on what level you see it. I mean, I think integrated workflows and integrated offers also. So where you basically digitize or sort of facilitate, let's say, more than just the construction, but also the planning and also the operations, or you coordinate also early design or even land acquisition. I mean, I think doing that using a digital workflow and using an optimized workflow is in my belief very much the future, because it's still too much. I recently also saw a chart where there's too much breakdowns between these phases of information, of efficiency, of time, and it's just, imagine that a BMW or an Audi or a Mercedes or the UK-based Austin Healey, they don't make those anymore, I think. But let's say, imagine nowadays you would build an efficient modern car in such a way. It would look probably like crap. It would probably not function, and it would be highly inefficient and very expensive. So I think we need to look more at what the automotive industry is doing, what the production industry is doing, and translate that into construction and real estate. Doesn't matter if it's off-site, on-site, modular construction or not modular, but we need to learn from standardized procedures and how other industries already made that shift to productive and efficient operations. And I think that's probably your question on integrated workflows and process. That makes a lot of sense. But yeah, you also need point solutions. You also will have challenges that are so specific or very niche, where you can just with one solution maybe unlock a lot of value or solve a lot of challenges. I mean, but it strongly depends on where it is. I mean, it's again use case specific.
Can you give us example? Maybe you guys have implemented any workflow solutions or point solutions recently or in general, if you can share?
I mean, you want to more like in digital space, or can it also be other areas? I mean,
any actually construction tech related.
Yeah, anything exactly. Innovative.
Anything innovative. I can probably mention two cases, and I ask because what is I think a dangerous or a challenging situation at the moment is that a lot of people talk about construction tech and property technology, and the word tech is always interpreted as digital, data-driven, and developed AI developed by some kid in high school, right? I think the big challenges in construction are material related, because we are we produce physical assets, and the whole material topic is chronically, and I see that frequently, chronically underestimated. So everyone looks at cool digital solutions, but no one looks at how current research in the labs or in large, also by the way, in the industry, could potentially reduce 10-20% of the footprint of a building in terms of CO2 emissions. So that's why I'm going to mention a physical example, not digital at all, which is an entrepreneurship case. We have also some information on that on the website, by the way, but I like this case because I was involved in it myself, and I think it's a great case to show that also physical innovation, so material innovations play a role. And what we did is we basically, in tunnel construction, it's going to be a bit technical, so everyone in real estate probably is going to shut down now, but in tunnel construction, you have different methodologies. One methodology is the typical drill and blast process, which means if you do drill and blast, you need to stabilize with concrete, with spraycrete. You need to stabilize the inner shell of the tunnel. In most regions in the world, that's quite stable. It won't deform so much. But there's regions in the world, including also the Alps, but also in Balkans, Northern Africa, etc., where the geological zones are quite complex, meaning if you dig a tunnel, the mountain fights back. When the mountain fights back on spraycrete and you put nothing in between, it breaks. You just basically lose your spraycrete, or it can create deformations, whatever. So what you do in construction, you put in between elements, the best way to explain is like a cushion almost.
Temporary propping, some sort of.
Exactly, or I think you call it like ductile systems that actually absorb this deformation. Typically, they're made from steel because steel is widely available, etc. It seems strong, but we had an entrepreneur, Manuel, from Austria. He was, now he's not anymore, but he was a construction manager in the Semmering Base Tunnel in Austria, one of the most complex and also one of the longest rail tunnels in Europe, but also one of the most complex ones. There was a lot of challenge with groundwater deformations. And he saw his man and his foreman working with these steel elements. And he was like, why would we carry around 80, 90 kilos of steel if we can also look for lighter materials? Well, so as part of his study, he was doing a master study back then, I think, he was comparing like different materials. And he figured out, what if we use high strength expanded polystyrene? So basically the same stuff that you have in your bike helmet, right? Slightly stronger material, but similar type of material. And he started to test with that in the lab, different labs, and then he got approval to do it actually in the tunnel. And we figured out that actually the performance line of that material is actually better than steel. The material is, a typical block weighs maybe 20 or 15 kilos compared to 80, 90 kilos. And imagine that with two guys with 40 degrees Celsius, you have to lift steel elements of 80, 90 kilo, including the health and safety risks. And he managed to replace that. And that ended up in a product that we're now patent pending. So also a very interesting case for us. That's what we're now implementing in several tunnels in Europe. And this is a way where we can improve and also stabilize the tunnel construction in a very critical phase, because tunnel construction, as soon as you start drilling, you want to keep going. It's like a little factory that moves forward. And with this, we could react very flexibly, also with different types of strength materials, etc. It's a bit technical, but this for me is like, I mean, yeah, of course, an engineer in a lab could have figured this out, but I wonder if that person would have been capable to really test and get as far as our construction manager did there on site. Of course, with help from customers, with help from his manager, with help from local specialists. But I think that was for me also the moment when we pushed that into the market. It was the moment where I realized we should pay more attention to material innovations, not only to tech. So that's more an improvement example, like a point solution, you could say.
Beautiful.
And then I think more integrated is a very cool case in real estate development, where we are working where we have a team called Real Estate Products, and they are basically I would say, an interesting hybrid of architects, product designers, and project developers. And they're working on standardized modular units. And I heard your previous episodes on modular construction, and yes, it's a challenging space, but we have one benefit because we don't produce these modules ourselves. We work with partners, so we actually focus really on building residential or for different use cases and designing circular according to circular principles these units. And what I want to say is about workflow. So what we did as well is together with partners, but mostly driven by in-house development, we set up a AI-based generative design module that helps to rapidly plan on certain plots and rapidly do the feasibility studies, which you can obviously easily do if you also own the design and if you know exactly what's in the design. So you can be very fast and you can compare thousands of scenarios in, let's say, minutes instead of in days or planning everything around with pen and paper. So that's a sort of an integrated flow of product development, or basically design, product development, feasibility study, development, construction, etc., up until operations. And that's part of what we call virtual layer. And that's a typical workflow solution where, of course, there's not a one-stop shop partner for that. You need to do that with different providers, in-house and also external. But I think that's a really cool case where we can make an impact in certain niches, because of course modular construction, in my opinion, should work in way more niches. But in the end, currently in Europe, it's still considered a niche compared to US or other markets. Yeah, 2 examples.
Yeah. Quick one from me. Do you guys consider robotics?
I think so, yes. With robotics, I mean, we get that question often. And my answer is always robotics, yes, but preferably off-site or near-site. And if it's on-site, then it's probably for very specific use cases. Think about logistics or think about inspection. And maybe mid-long-term construction sites are roboticized, but I think, and please, if there's anyone listening, please reach out to me because I'm really interested in this topic. I don't think that robotics on-site is going to have the future, because I don't think all this on-site construction or focus on only on-site construction has no future. It will still happen in a lot of niche markets, in a lot of geographies. I'm not claiming that there won't be any more on-site and we drop everything in flat packs and modules on-site. Totally not. But in the long term, I don't think it makes sense to bring the robots on site. The robots, any robotic expert will say that, will perform like a charm if you have it in a clear, clean, and optimized production environment. And well, we all know construction doesn't have clean, clear, or optimized production environments. And until we reach that point, I think a lot of robotics companies will go bankrupt, and probably the ones will stay or bankrupt or might need to pivot. Let's put it that way. And the focus will really be on near site and on site. But I do think there's niche robotics cases on site, but we are still testing to figure out which ones make really sense, because you need a little bit of jack of all trades. And you don't want to have too much robots on site as long as there's also humans on site, because that doesn't, I mean, yes, cobots and such, yes, could work, but it's not easy. But where I'm already 100% convinced is this robotic approach, more in offsite, either by us or by partners, where you optimize the production and prepare the production. Yeah, that's a bit my take on it, but I might be wrong. I'm not an expert, I'm not a robotics expert, but we talk luckily to a lot of robotics players and startups and experts. And I think there is a lot of niches where it could work, but probably a bit more near site or off site than just on site.
How do you look at ROI on innovation that you're thinking of implementing?
You mean return on innovation or return on the investment?
Right? Return, well, actually, is it not the same case in terms of when we speak about innovation? Return on innovation, return on investment and innovation.
Yeah, it depends on. I think it depends on how you see it, but for me, it's the same. I would say. I mean, in the end, you want to make a return on investment with your innovation activities. And
yes.
We track obviously a lot of indicators related to how we create an internal, let's say, portfolio of ideas and how we engage with the outside world. So I would say that's more the input variables you track. At the end of the day, it's about how much savings or how much new revenue can we generate, right? Or how much can we influence the final number game of the company. We're, let's say, when we started our central innovation team a few years ago, we started tracking the basic input parameters because no one can promise a positive return in 1-2 years of innovation or central innovation. But now we start to track that better, and we see that there's revenue potential. We see that there's actual savings, either direct or indirect. I think what is key is to understand that innovation will never, let's say, it will never have a purely 100% return on innovation, meaning part of your activities will be indirectly contributing to this ROI. And I think it's very important in larger companies. I mean, if you're a startup, you need to look for ROI from day one, or you need to consider that it's key. But in our case, we also need to look at the cultural and at the transformational role we play. So if we have a multiplication effect, meaning that our employees are more trained and motivated to do innovation or to understand innovation, to assess technological potential and adopt technological solutions, and that's of course the, let's say, the prime know-how or skill set, if you know how to test, develop, and scale business models newly on the market or set up new value propositions on the market. That's what counts more, right? And I think in the end, innovative solutions need to have a return. Sometimes they might not have, but they might have an indirect return that long-term pays out. And you need to have all of that. So for me, innovation activities, it's also a little bit of a portfolio, different kinds of activities. But in the end of the day, we're a business, we're a corporate with a clear P&L. It needs to have a positive effect, obviously.
Very good.
So we're tracking that. Actually, each year we become better at tracking that.
Nice. Quick one. We're running out of time, but just on the innovation piece, where do you think that like larger corporates, or maybe even from your own experience, like it might be more of a lessons learned, or where perhaps things went wrong or do go wrong generally?
We actually host internal screw up nights to discuss that. We did that a few times. It's not easy to find stories. I'll be honest there, because people are not. There's there's always screw ups. I mean, anyone in construction that says they do perfect, you're lying. Everyone makes mistakes in any industry, but it's not easy to find cases. But the people that do speak up have very interesting cases. But honestly, no, we try to also establish a bit of a open approach to also talking about failures and lessons learned. With innovation, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. I mean, one thing where we clearly changed in the last 1 to 2 years after this, let's say, honeymoon phase in our innovation setup, is to really go closer to the divisions, to our commercial teams, to our project teams, to really understand what are their needs and their challenges. Before, it was a bit more mushrooming. Let's see what happens. What are interesting spaces out there? Now we're more aligned, which is key, because of course the less you do that, the more criticism you'll get from management. So that's one learning that we could clearly do. Then I think, and from this position, I can also thank a lot of startups for their patience, because I think we also had or have very interesting startup collaborations. But I know that it can be kind of a hassle to get into a final contract or into a final agreement with us, which doesn't mean we cannot work, but it can be very cumbersome. So one thing that I see as a clear learning is to accelerate this procedure from getting to know a startup to closing a clear agreement where we can work as partners together. That's too long, not for a typical supplier or subcontractor, but for a startup, that's just too long. We need to shorten that. That's also a learning. And I think also we've seen our entrepreneurship program, so internal innovation topics, that we had a few of these cases where we have entrepreneurs. Most of them are then not anymore in the company, maybe because they pursued their idea outside, but that basically already claimed sort of victory and claimed already to have the idea that will disrupt the company. and try to negotiate about exit fees or deal structures and who's going to own how much % of this company because it will be successful. And those cases in the beginning were quite impressive also to me and to the team. Like, okay, how do we deal with this? But also I use that example to say that manage the individuals and also manage a little bit the energy and the mindset of the people you work with in entrepreneurship, because they are key. But we had some learnings there as well, I can tell you. People that were frustrated or totally, like screwed up because it completely went in the wrong direction or spent a lot of money on something that didn't make sense. But yeah, that happens.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to ask, we touched on this before recording. Why don't you guys have a CVC arm within Implenia? There's lots of US-based general contractors who have CVC arm, and I think there are reasons for that for them. Yep. How do you see it from innovation manager's point of view?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. There is indeed a few contractors globally, but also in Europe, that have a CVC arms or corporate venture capital arm, or are invested as a limited partner in an existing VC fund. I think it could also have a lot of value add to a corporate, but you need to determine clearly with management and with your stakeholders, like what is the value we try to get, right? I mean, if the expectation of management is you're going to find only promising cases that we can scale and influence sort of as the partners for a company, it's difficult because you're only one of many on the cap table. Even in a CVC way, you could have quite a share, but you're still, you're not going to be having full control. So what we do is we have a very strategic focus on investing in startups and tech companies. Always preceded by a clear partnership or successful proofs of concepts or successful projects we've executed together, and only then we start to discuss this investment case further. And we are not a very active investor, so we do invest let's say every now and then, but only in very strategic cases where we can clearly see either a volume potential or a certain know-how potential, and that's why for us a CVC participation or a CVC setup doesn't really make sense at the moment. But I do think if you align that clearly to the goals of the company, there's good benefits in being either a limited partner in a fund or to set up something like that. But it needs to have its right space and time, of course.
All right, guys, I think it's time to wrap up. The stock is still up 1.44%, so I think people are watching.
Really good. Keep it
We
coming.
should have done a live stream. We could have watched it.
Or when we release, the stock price will go even further, right? So this is now...
You're welcome.
Oh, great. But thanks a lot, guys. It was a great pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Karel. Could you tell our people where they can find out more about you?
Yep. I think best way over LinkedIn. You can find my account or we have, I think, also... You can find me on the website, write me, not if you're a generic SaaS player, but just come with cool propositions, but always happy to talk.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Karel.
All right.